Modern Husbands podcast, where Dr. Ross, Christian, and Brian host national experts who share ideas to manage money and the home as teammates. Although Christian Sherrill is our co-host, for today, we are flipping the script to speak with him and his wife, Dr. Hayman. Christian is the Director of Growth and Advocacy at NextGen Personal Finance. His work and passion are to help end the opportunity gap, specifically by guaranteeing all high school students engage in a personal finance course before they graduate from high school by the year 2030. Christian is a Dartmouth College grad. Christian's wife, Chelsea Hayman, MD, is an emergency medicine resident at NYU. Their story and ideas to manage the modern home is full of ideas applicable to many other high-achieving 21st century couples. Today's discussion is part 2 of how you can support your partner's career. Enjoy the show. Dr. Hayman, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Well, for our listeners, or I should say viewers who watch on YouTube, you'll see that Dr. Hayman and Christian are sitting together. And that's because although Christian's typically a co-host, they are married. And I told them earlier that if I had a Modern Husbands magazine and could have like a picture of like the perfect Modern Husbands couple and how they support each other, it would be like them right here, right now. So I'm thrilled that Dr. Hayman joined us today, and Christian will be here as well. I promise not to try to make him blush too much. Let's start out with a little bit of background. Dr. Hayman, can you tell us a little bit about your journey from college until now?
Yeah, of course. So I grew up in California to a family with quite a few doctors in them, but in college, I realized that I didn't really have much life experience. So I decided, instead of going straight to medical school from undergrad, I decided to Teach for America, which is actually where I met Christian. So after college, graduating as a pre-med psych with a psych degree, I taught 7th grade science for 3 years in Richmond, California. And I still loved medicine, and I loved teaching, educating about health. So I decided to go to medical school also in California. And so I went to medical school for 4 years, realized I loved the emergency medicine field. And so now I am a second-year resident at NYU and Bellevue in New York City as an emergency medicine physician.
And so what's tougher, dealing with somebody who is really in bad shape, who's come into the ER, or a 7th grade class on the second to last day of school?
That is a great question. And I think about that a lot, which part of my life I felt was more challenging. And, I think teaching definitely was more challenging. I think in the location that we were in, the state of the education system, it was a lot more challenging as a young teacher than, in the emergency room, where you have such a strong support system, and you work more I felt like as a team than sometimes you do feel like in education. So even though working in the emergency room is really very challenging and still one of the hardest things that I do, I think being a 7th grade science teacher still takes the #1 spot as like the most challenging time in my life.
Well, all three of us, and of course, Modern Husbands, have a deep appreciation and love for teachers. So you already went over how you all met, but is there any specific story that goes along with that?
Yeah, there is. There's what I think is a pretty funny story. So 2 days after we graduated from college, we were whisked right to Loyola Marymount, which is a college in LA, to do our teacher training for 5 weeks before we were in the classroom. We were both part of the Richmond Corps. So the first time we were meeting was in like a classroom on the campus. We were eating Chipotle. None of us really knew each other, and we were going around the room introducing ourselves. And Christian happens to be like right in the center of the room. He's like surrounded by people. And so he goes up, stands up, and because he's trying to address everyone in the room, he's like looking around and he's like, wow, I feel like I'm a rotisserie Christian right now. Just a laugh from everyone. Such a Christian, dad joke, but it was so memorable. And, I thought it was, very cute and very humble. And we got to know each other as both science teachers, and the rest is history.
I can just visualize that moment.
Brian, in our second meeting, we went to the beach with some of our friends. We used to go down to, it's right in, what was that beach? Marina del Rey, something?
I don't know.
In Santa Monica, near Santa Monica. And Chelsea and I were at the beach together, but I had absolutely no idea that there was like any, that she thought I was like worthwhile or whatever. So we had all gotten out of the water, sitting around on towels, and Chelsea had like made a little spot on her towel right next to her for
okay.
Christian to come sit there, but I just like did not get the memo. So I was sitting like 3-4 feet in front of her, and there was just this empty space next to her. I'm such a knucklehead, but
Did you at what point, Dr. Heyman, did you want to smack him in the back of the head and be like, just get over here?
I mean, it was pretty immediate, but I at the same time I was like, maybe he's just not interested. I didn't know at that point how clueless he just really was. So it took him quite a while to figure things out on his own, which I think was necessary.
Bashful. All right. So Christian, what do you do now?
I do growth and advocacy for a nonprofit called Next Gen Personal Finance. We're on a mission to guarantee that every high school student in the US will take a personal finance class before they graduate, so that when young people are headed out into the real world, they have, the financial skills to thrive in an increasingly challenging financial landscape. And so I do a bunch of different things within that organization. I advocate at the state level these days, working with different state legislatures and state departments of education to roll out personal finance graduation requirements at the state level. I work a lot with educators, so I conduct professional development sessions. And Brian, you back in the day, helped me out quite a bit with the credit certification course, the consumer credit certification course, and I also do a consumer skills course focused on basically how the internet and social media impacts consumer spending decisions, and what we can do about that for young people who are bombarded with social media. So it's a mixed bag of things that I do for the organization, but I just really believe in the mission. So happy to put in the work.
And how many hours a week on average do you work?
Not as many as Chelsea.
Look you're so modest. Is it fair to say 50 to 60?
Sure.
Okay. And the reason I share this is because I want to provide context to the listeners. Most households, the majority of households in the United States, are dual income. And so when we have these conversations, I don't want people to believe that one partner is at home with very few responsibilities outside of that home. That the modern day America is full of two households where two people are working hard, and that you have to find ways to make sure that you each are supported. But there are times where one person who has a career that is in particularly stressful, or one person has a career, like in my case, where the person is extremely ambitious in the corporate world, where it's necessary to maybe do a little bit more to provide the support structure at home that's necessary for their partners to thrive. And so kind of understanding that as context, Dr. Hayman, how do you two manage your household?
Well, it's a team effort, and it's definitely still a work in progress. I think, like you said, Christian does work 50, 60 hours a week. And I generally, especially when I'm in the emergency room, work 80 plus hours a week. So, Christian knows that both of us prefer a clean and a clean household. You can cut that out. That sounded terrible.
No, that's authentic.
A well-maintained household, and he, without asking or me nagging, I think would be the right word, just keeps it clean, takes the time to in the morning or in the middle of the day when he has time off or doesn't have a meeting, will make sure things are clean and tidy, and cooks me meals, because most days when I work from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. or 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. I am so exhausted I kind of melt on the couch, and having a household that is clean and having a meal that's prepared, I that's just a game changer for me. And I say, even though my job is very stressful, and I think majority of residents across the country are pretty burnt out and find themselves unhappy a lot of the time, because I have such a strong and supportive husband and have a household that I feel like safe and warm, and I can come and talk with him and he will listen. It makes my job the next day just so much easier. So that's how he supports me in the household. And, it's the small things like paying our rent, knowing how much money to put towards retirement, saving up for like our future family. That's something we do together. I think it's like extremely important for us to both be knowledgeable about our finances and, learn from others. We learn a lot from my dad, who's also in finance, and what's the best savings account to put money towards, like a future house. And Christian learns a lot on his job, and I count on his knowledge to help me with my credit card and our retirement accounts. But we still learn, we make mistakes, and we're still young. And I think that as long as we're willing to listen to one each other, but also do our own research into how best, have a happy and successful future, I think that's, very important.
One of the reasons that I was so excited about having you two on here is because I knew how you worked together at home, and men are struggling right now, many men, not all, just to find their place in the modern household, because 40 years ago, the roles were very clear. A man's responsibility was to provide financially, and that when they did that, they felt fulfillment. And what's happened over time is that, fortunately, there has been an evolution that is providing equity inside the workplace, and the world's better because of it. But we also need to make sure that men recognize that with that means that there are new roles that a man can have that will also define how great of a partner they are, that go beyond bringing home the bacon, so to speak. And that men are, unfortunately right now, there's more men who commit suicide than women. Men are depressed, in large part, according to research, because they can't find their way. They don't understand where they fit. And Dr. Hayman, as you were describing what Christian does, it was with sincere appreciation. Mm-hmm. And you could see, as bashful as Christian is, that it made him feel good. And I think that in itself, if there are any female listeners, just to show appreciation to your partner for doing those things, to recognize that even though your partner also works, that they're going above and beyond, recognizing what you have to do. That gives men the same kind of feeling that they would have 50 years ago, walking in from a day's work, holding their briefcase, knowing that they provided for their family. They're just providing in a different way. So thank you for sharing that. So when you talk about, managing money together, one of the things that stuck out to me is that you both had a hand in it, which is really important, because you now have shared goals, right? So let's divide managing money into two things. Let's divide it into managing money is just establishing goals and an understanding of the direction you're going to go. And then controlling money, meaning the mechanics of it, right? Like who actually pays the rent, who's the one that goes in and ups the retirement. How do you all divide those two things?
That's a good question. I think as far as things that, have a timeline, and for example, rent is due this day, I think just my nature, I'm more organized, and I remember, okay, it's the last weekend of the month, we need to pay rent. So that's something that I'm just, a little better at. And so I make sure rent is paid on time. Our electricity bill and our cable bill, everything is paid. I think as far as, managing our credit score or retirement and those sort of nitty gritty details that, Christian is much more knowledgeable about. He, advises me, and he's much better at, knowing when to pay our credit card bill to help, with our credit score. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but so he understands the background of that a little bit better, whereas I'm more like the organizational schedule, making sure things are on schedule.
All right, Christian, I've got to ask, you love to cook. I love to cook, but you're far better than me. What is your favorite meal to prepare?
Favorite as measured by the frequency with which I cook this meal would be like turkey tacos with like onions and mushrooms, some bell peppers, some tasty seasoning going on, although I gotta up my seasoning game. But anyway, that would be in terms of like frequency. In terms of like the amount of joy that goes into prepping the meal, one of my favorite things to cook is chicken piccata.
I don't even know what that is.
It's chicken, as the name would suggest.
Yeah. I know that.
Parsley, capers, garlic, lemon, usually served over pasta, but you can switch it up however you want, and it sounds
good. Could you switch it up maybe with a little white rice?
Yeah, some rice, maybe some cauliflower, maybe get one of those funky like green pastas
that we have so much of right now.
I subscribe to a thing that delivers us it's a subscription. So a subscription of different food items. And I so regret it, because I can't figure out how to unsubscribe from certain items in the box. And one of those items is those darn chickpea pastas. And so we have like 40 boxes of chickpea pasta.
We don't really eat that often anyways.
Neither of us likes it.
And so this was that we both established that I should be ordering the groceries, which I decided he wanted to help. And I think we also established that that's not one of his skills. He'll stick to that. I'll order all the groceries. I'll make sure we have enough of everything. He'll cook. I think that's
what's the meal that you prefer most that he prepares, Dr. Heyman?
This would be interesting.
That's a great question. He makes these chicken, I think it's chicken and ground chicken and ground beef meatballs with like some Mediterranean, it tastes like Mediterranean spices. I don't really know what he makes it with. That's my favorite meat. I think my favorite vegetable is, I love a good ratatouille with, the squash, zucchini, eggplant is my favorite vegetable. So those two combined, maybe over occasionally a bit of the chickpea pasta. Rarely. That sounds like a good meal to me.
I'm gonna put you on the spot, Christian. Can you send over those recipes so we can post them with the podcast?
Sure. Now I am a shoot from the hip kind of guy when it comes to cooking.
Okay.
This is why if I ever try to bake something, it's a disaster. But cooking, chef's kiss, because I put a lot of heart, put a lot of soul. I don't know if I ever really follow a recipe, but I used to have a podcast with a ton of recipes, and I bet that some of the ones that have been described here are on there, so I can send those to you.
Perfect.
Yeah,
that'd be perfect. Okay, so I want to end with just kind of one takeaway. We like to do this for our listeners, where they can walk away realizing, okay, this is an actionable step that I can do to make changes. And when I ask this question, I want to provide additional context here, so our listeners kind of really appreciate the relationship. When you have a spouse who is working on a job that has really high stakes, like when things go wrong for me in my job right now, I can just edit the blog post. Like the world is not going to come to an end. It's okay. I sent the wrong tweet. Okay, I'll hit delete. Where Dr. Heyman, her job, if something happens, or if it's just something that is unmanageable, people die, right? So I can only imagine the emotional toll that takes on somebody. And I bring this up because I think that it's important that as spouses, we are empathetic and we look at what life looks like through the lens of our spouse, to gather an appreciation of what they need to come home and unwind. And so with all of that said, what is one piece of advice, Dr. Heyman, that you want to share with our listeners, whether it's something that Christian does that you love, or something Christian does where you're like, I could not go without this?
It's a really great question. I feel like there's quite a few things, but
Feel free.
I think at the end of the day, when I had, a terrible shift, when I come home, the most amazing thing that he does, and this is something that he didn't always do. I think it took communication between us to really figure out how best to support me. But the thing that he does the best is sitting next to me on the couch and listening, just letting me talk as long as I need, and just sitting there. He's not on his phone. He's not on his computer. And he listens. And at the end, he doesn't try and say, well, why don't you do this, or make any suggestions of how, I can feel better or how I should proceed. It's, wow, that sucks. Like, I'm sorry, that was a really hard day. I'm sorry that happens. I believe in you. And I think that's something that he didn't know how to do originally. Originally, he really wanted to try and figure out a solution to whatever problem I was having, and that's not what I needed. And I feel like, especially because we have very different jobs versus we used to have the same job. It's just so important that he is there to listen. And that is really, really meaningful, because that's usually all I need at the end of the day. And then we put on a happy show, like a New Girl, and he has dinner ready for me. And, I wake up the next morning and go to my shift.
Well, I I'm so proud to call you my friend, Christian. Just hearing that warms my heart, knowing how good of a spouse you are. Dr. Heyman and Christian, loved having you on the show. We really appreciate it. You certainly are a model of what we like to see from modern husbands couples, and for our listeners, I'm sure you've got some great ideas from today's podcast. Thanks again for joining.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to click subscribe wherever you download your podcasts and share the Modern Husbands podcast with your friends. A special thanks to our guest and, of course, to all of our listeners. Please be on the lookout for new and exciting announcements on modernhusbands.com. Until next time, be well.